There was no reference to this man, Muhammad. We can't find any reference to the city called Mecca. We can't find any manuscript for any book called the Qur'an. None of this we can find in the 7th century. But that's just silence. Where's the evidence? How do you prove evidence for something that never existed? Do you see the problem, folks? That was 1995. This is 2025, 30 years later. And everything I'm going to introduce tonight is based on evidence. We finally have the evidence.
Welcome to Events and History, where we explore the origins, teachings, and historical development of Islam with a fact-based, analytical approach. This is part 2 of this series. We finally have the evidence series. In this video, Dr. J. Smith presents Islam-shattering evidence that shuts down Raymond Ibrahim, a Christian apologist and Islamic scholar who challenges his position that there was no prophet called Muhammad who received the Qur'an and preached in Mecca in the 7th century. He presents Raymond's 10-point challenge and then goes ahead to dismantle every one of those points. Let's watch as Dr. J destroys all the legs the standard Islamic narrative stands on, one point at a time.
Until April of this year, and then a man named Raymond Ibrahim, who's a Christian, put up these 2 videos in April of this year. Raymond Ibrahim, how many of you know who Raymond Ibrahim is? Okay, 1. Good man, fine Christian debater. And he's the only one that's dared to do this. And I thank God that he did this, because he put up 2 videos, one on April 9th and the other one on April 11th, basically saying that, and he's attacking me. He says, you know, I don't think Jay knows what he's talking about. He said this idea that Muhammad didn't exist is not only laughable, it is probably the worst polemic at all to use. It's the weakest polemic we could ever use. The weakest polemic you can use. Isn't that interesting? So what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to shut him down. I'm going to take the 10 accusations, and he gave 10 accusations. And if you're watching, Raymond Ibrahim, thank you for doing this, because finally I have an academic who's actually taking me on these subjects. And you gave 10 good questions. And these are the same questions you're going to hit if you go out in the world and if you talk to Muslims. And the number one first thing is Muhammad is one of the most historically supported people in history. So you cannot say he didn't exist, because there's so much historical support for him. Number 2, in fact, Muhammad has more historical support for him than Jesus has. Ooh, I love that. Number 3, if Muhammad did not exist, how can you explain the Sunni-Shiite divide? The Sunnis who were confronting the Shiites from Iran and Iraq. Look what's going on in the world right now. Look at all the problems. It's all between Sunnis and Shiites. How can you explain that if Muhammad didn't exist? Number 4, there are no incontrovertible proofs of Muhammad's non-existence. Ooh, that's a real whammy. I can see someone laughing already, because you can see it's a contradicting term. Since the traditions, that's the Islamic traditions about Muhammad, are so embarrassing, why would they write them? He's such an embarrassment, Mr. Smith. Number 6, Mecca. You can't use Mecca against Muhammad. It's not an argument you can use against Muhammad. Number 7, no one can prove or disprove historical facts. Ooh, boy, that's a whammy. And it comes down to a matter of faith. Doesn't matter what you find, Muslims will always believe it. Number 9, the claims against Muhammad's existence are merely an academic and subjective exercise. That's all it is. Just because you don't like Muslims, is what he said. Boy, I wonder where he got that from. And then number 10, the best polemic is not the historical polemic. The best polemic is just to show how irrelevant Muhammad is. Confront his character. Confront his morality. That's the best polemic. That's what we call the internal polemic. So tonight, what I'm going to do, let's go through each one of these 10 to see if Ibrahim or Raymond, actually I should call him Raymond. I'm going to call him Raymond from here on out, because I have 2 good friends named Ibrahim. One is Ayman Ibrahim, and the other one is Raymond Ibrahim. I don't know Raymond Ibrahim. I've never met him. I'm sure he's a great guy. But I know Ayman Ibrahim, and Ayman Ibrahim actually is head of SES on the Islamic branch there. He's in charge of all the Islamic work, and he absolutely stands with me on this position. So rather than call him Ibrahim, because people are confused which Ibrahim I'm talking, let's just call Raymond and Ayman, okay? We'll stick with Raymond from here on out. So, here we go. This is what the Muslims claim. This is what the Islamic traditions claim. This is what the standard Islamic narrative says. Isn't that great? Standard Islamic narrative. S-I-N. This is what sin tells us. Muslim sin's traditional claims. They say this: for the past 1400 years, Muhammad was the last and greatest prophet. He modeled Islam as the paradigm for the world. He received the Qur'an as his final revelation for the world. Therefore, the Qur'an, his revelation, was sent down only to him between 610 and 632. It is the greatest, the only perfectly preserved revelation, and also the final revelation. It corrects the previously corrupted revelation, in other words, our revelation. And therefore, Mecca was the city Muhammad was born in and lived in for the first 52 years of his life. Thus, Islam is completely dependent on three things. Now, this you've seen before, for those of you who are here before. These are the three things: one book called the Quran, one man named Muhammad, and one place called Mecca. Since these three areas are foundational to Islam, we should investigate them at the time they all existed. That means in the early 7th century. And in the place they existed, that means the central western part of Arabia, known as the Hijaz, where Mecca and Medina are located. So notice, these three things are what holds up Islam. It's like three legs of a stool. You have the Quran, you have Muhammad, and you have Mecca as the three legs. If you start to attack one of those legs and it finally collapses, the other two collapse as well. All three are needed. You can't have one without the other. One without the other two. Are you following that?
Using the traditional Islamic narrative on the Islamic Awareness website, Dr. J. Smith established the three legs Islam stands on, which are the Prophet Muhammad, the Quran, and Mecca. Given the traditional narrative, the man, the book, and the place have to exist in the early 7th century, when they said Islam was started by Muhammad. If any of these three legs is missing, their story falls apart.
With that in mind, let's now look at Raymond's 10 suppositions and assess them one by one. Supposition number 1. Muhammad is one of the most historically supported people in history. How many people, just show of hands, believe that? Wow, not one of you. I've already got you converted. We can go on to supposition number 2 then. No, we need to go with supposition 1 so you know how to answer this, okay? Now, to understand what he's talking about, we need to look at what they're saying. This is what he says. This is what the Muslims will say. They would believe that if you look at that map there, that Muhammad Empire included that brown area. So that's that area right there, or over on this side, right there. I'm going to have to do this to both sides, okay? That brown area where Mecca and Medina. Look where Mecca and Medina are. They're right in the central western part of that brown area. So when he died in 632, that's as large as Islam was. Once he died, then you have Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali, the next 4 caliphs, what they call the rightly guided caliphs, then come to power, and they expand the borders out. And so it includes all the orange area, from Tripoli all the way to India, and from Turkey all the way down to Yemen. Over on this side, from Tripoli to India, and from Turkey all the way down to the Hadramaut, or what is today Yemen and Oman. That's a pretty big area. So it is by far, by 661, it is the second largest superpower of its day by that time. And then when the Umayyads come to power in 661, starting with Muawiyah, he and others after him up until 749, for the next roughly 100 years, they expanded out to the purple area. So it includes Spain all the way to India, and then from the Yemen all the way to Turkey. Over here, there's Spain, and there's India, and there's Turkey, and there is Yemen. So all that area comes under their jurisdiction. That's their story. And there's been no reason not to confront it or dissuade you from it, because it's a pretty good story. I mean, that's all we've been told, right? And you've always believed that there was a man named Muhammad, and there were 4 caliphs that followed after him: Abu Bakr, Umar, Uthman, and Ali. But I'm going to show you there's a problem with that. Let's look and see where we get Islam's emergence. Let's put it on a timeline so you can see what's going on. So Muhammad, according to what the Islamic narrative, the standard Islamic narrative, sin tells us, is that Muhammad was born in 570. He started receiving his revelations in a place called Mecca in 610. And then in 621, he suddenly is woken up in the middle of the night and told to get on the back of a winged horse called the Burak, who flies him up from Mecca up to Jerusalem. He goes up to the 7 heavens and meets Allah, who tells him to pray 50 times a day. He comes down to the fifth heaven, meets Moses, says, that's way too many. So he bounces back and forth between the fifth and the seventh heaven, getting it down from 50 to 45 to 35 to 15 to 10, down to 5 prayers. Once he gets it to 5 prayers, Moses, okay, that's enough. So he shuts back down to Jerusalem, gets on back of the winged horse and flies back to Mecca. That happens in 621. It's known as the Mi'raj. You've all heard this before. This is nothing new. And then in 622, he then moves from Mecca up to Medina and takes over and that's where the caliphate starts in 622. He then comes back to Mecca and takes over Mecca. So now he controls both Mecca and Medina in 630, and he controls the holy places where the Kaaba is, and then he dies in 632, poisoned by one of his wives. So that's his life. That's the timeline to show you what Muhammad's life is like. And then Abu Bakr comes. He only lasts 2 years. He then dies peacefully. He is followed by Umar, who only lasts 10 years. He is killed. So when he is killed, Uthman takes over. He only lasts 12 years. He is killed. But while he is in power, the Qur'an is put together. When he is killed, Ali takes over, the adopted son of Muhammad. And he only lasts 5 years before he is killed at the Battle of Siffin by Muawiyah. So what am I putting that up there? What we're saying, according to what standard Islamic narrative tells us and what Raymond Ibrahim tells us, that Islam was fully formed by 661, right? Mid-7th century.
According to the standard Islamic narrative, Islam is fully formed and the Quran has been written and canonized by 661 AD. Watch as Dr. J destroys that false history.
We're talking about the 7th century still, 1400 years ago. Now here's the problem. How do we know everything I've just told you? And I've not told you much. I've just told you bare bones because we have to be careful of time. That's what they tell us. Where did that story come from? That's what you want to know. Well, the story comes from the Islamic traditions, the standard Islamic narrative. This is what they tell us. And when you go to the standard Islamic narrative, they tell us that Muhammad dies in 632, and the person that writes his biography down is this guy, Ibn Ishaq. Ibn Ishaq. The only problem is, look when he died. Whenever you see a D, that means his death date. I'm putting their death dates because they can't write anything after they die, all right? So I'm putting the last possible time they could have written something down. 765. Do you see a problem with that, folks? Did Ibn Ishaq know Muhammad? Did he ever see Muhammad? Did he hear Muhammad? So how did he know his biography? Do you have anything written by Ibn Ishaq? No. So I held this up. Where does this come from? That's not Ibn Ishaq. His name is Ibn Hisham. This guy is the guy that wrote it down. This is the one that took what Ibn Ishaq said, didn't like a lot of it, so he threw it out and only retained what he liked. And so that's what we have today. So these 2 books, these 2 volumes, come from a man named Ibn Hisham. Look when he died, 833. That's even later. That's 70 years later. And then another man named Al-Waqidi who wrote down the battles of Muhammad. So they are the ones that actually give us the story of Muhammad's life, not Ibn Ishaq. So bye-bye, Ibn Ishaq. We don't need you. Goodbye. Now, that's the first genre. The second genre are known as the hadith, the sayings of Muhammad. And they're written down by these guys here. Al-Bukhari is the most important. He is the most prolific. He is the one that was given 600,000 of these stories, and he whittled them down all the way down to 7,439. So he throws out 98% and only retains 2%. And he does that before he dies in 870. Then we have Sahih Muslim, who dies in 875, At-Tirmidhi, 884. Look at the dates. They die. 887, 899 for Dawood, Nisa, 915. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 of them. Did any of them know Muhammad? Did they ever hear him say anything? Yet they write down what he said. They all lived 240 and later, years after Muhammad. That's not the only genre. We have 2 more genres, the tafsir and the tahriq. That's the commentaries that help you to understand the Quran. You can't make sense of this. 25% of this, even the Muslim scholars don't understand. And of those of you who have read the Quran, how much of it can you understand? It goes all over the place, doesn't it? Ulta pulta, as we say in India. It jumps all over the place. Stories don't begin. Stories don't end. There's no transitional phrases to help you from story to story. Thank God our Bible's not like that, but the Quran is. So you need commentaries to explain it. And that's why the commentaries have to be written. But look who's the first man to write it down. His name is Al-Tabari, 923. That's over 300 years. That's almost 300 years after Muhammad. So everything we know about who this man was, what he did and what he said, comes from 200 to 300 years later. How many of you are happy with that? You're not happy with it? You're happy with it? You're a good man. I like you. 'Cause I know why you're happy with it, because that makes our job a lot easier, doesn't it? See, he's being smart. But let me ask you, sir, you're going to be Abdul right now, all right? Abdul. You're happy, you're a Muslim, you love that. What about Jesus Christ? Don't we also have a hadith of Jesus, the sayings of Jesus? Don't we also have a sirah of Jesus, the biography of Jesus? Yes, we do, don't we? For those of you who are Christian, not you, Abdul, you're a Muslim, okay? Stay a Muslim now. So, as a Muslim, you don't have anything for 200 to 300 years, but we have the sirah of Jesus, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, right? Who wrote down what Jesus did. The hadith of Jesus, what he said, that's written in red letters in some of your Bibles. Anytime Jesus spoke, that's the hadith of Jesus. So we have the same genre, right? The tafsir of what Jesus said and did would be the commentaries of Paul's letters. He would take what Jesus said and apply it to Ephesus and to Philippi and to Corinth, right? So there's the tafsir. So we have the same genre in our New Testament, and then the tahqiq, which would be the histories of mankind. That is in the book of Acts, the history of the early church. So we have the same four genres that you see up on the screen there. But when were they written? We're going to get to that. Hold on to that, because that's going to answer one of my questions. So you stay right there, Abdul. I'm going to keep talking to you. I like that. I mean, when a guy agrees with me, it's so nice, funny to have someone that agrees with me. I'm going to put up Abdul Malik's name there, because he is the one that actually introduces the name Muhammad. Did I say Muhammad? Ooh, boy, slap my mouth. No, he doesn't. He doesn't introduce the name Muhammad. You're going to see why in about 10 minutes. Nonetheless, he's the first one to get up that title. And it's not Muhammad, as you're going to find out. But it's these people here, the Abbasids that I've just put up there, they are the ones that actually make him into the Muhammad that we know today. And I'm emphasizing Muhammad for a reason. I'm overemphasizing it for a reason. You'll see why. So, conclusion. Muhammad was revealed 84 years after the Abbasids created him, 141 years after he was first introduced, yet 201 years after he supposedly lived. Raymond, however, considers this 200-year gap as perfectly acceptable and thus not a problem. How many of you agree with Raymond? You should. Raise your hand. You just did. Come on, Abdul, get your hand up there. He's suddenly getting a chicken foot because he knows that he's going to be put on the hot seat. Don't get chicken foot on me, please. Stay there. I want you to be a good Muslim tonight, all right? And here's the other problem. Look at the distance and direction. Now, everything that Muslims, including Abdul sitting here, says happens in those two cities that you see right there that are circled in green. Do you see them up there? Mecca and Medina. That's where everything happens. That's where all this takes place. That's where Muhammad lived. That's where he was born, there in Mecca. He was there for 52 years, then moved to Medina, and he spent that whole time receiving this book here in those two cities. Do you see where they are? Just so you see them on the map. But here's the problem. Everything we know that's written about him, about his life, does not come from those cities. They come from that city, Baghdad, which is 1,200 miles away. Ibn Hisham, the man who actually wrote that, this guy here who wrote on his biography, he was born in Basra, grew up in Cairo, and wrote in Baghdad. Basra is a good 1,200 miles away. Cairo is a good 990 miles away, and of course Baghdad is 1,200 miles. The guy who wrote down his sayings came from Bukhara, which is in Uzbekistan, which is 2,600 miles away. The guy who wrote down all the tafsir and the tahqiq comes from Tabaristan, which is northern Iran today. That is 1,700 miles. None of these traditional writers lived or worked in Mecca or Medina. They were way too far to the north of Mecca and came from the west and east of Baghdad. Doesn't Raymond realize that these are Abbasid writers, all writing after 750 and way too far away? Has he forgotten about this? Or should we remind him? Abdul, you're his spokesman now. You tell me. Please knock on his door and tell him, all right? And ask him, how is he going to answer this question?
This is mind-blowing. The first thing ever written about Prophet Muhammad by his follower came from someone who lived 201 years after the Prophet was supposed to have died. And this writer was writing from faraway Baghdad, nowhere near Mecca, where the Prophet was supposed to have lived. How are we supposed to trust what he wrote? This is only the beginning. Dr. J is just getting started. Watch part 3 to follow the gist.